Have you ever felt that sudden ice-cold dread that grips you for no reason? Some say it's just nerves, others believe it's something more, something ancient, aware. Tonight we investigate a place where innocent fun blurred into unspeakable terror. It's a story about a carnival with a dark, impossible secret hidden beneath the bright lights. Imagine an attraction so alluring yet so deeply sinister, promising joy but delivering something terrifying. Blurred photos, garbled audio recordings, desperate pleas for answers. We are about to delve into a true crime carnival mystery that will make you question everything. Some doors are best left unopened. Sometimes the most terrifying things are hidden in plain sight. It arrived without a whisper in Oakhaven. One morning the townsfolk awoke to find a carnival spread across the old miller's field. Brightly colored tents and towering rides kissed the pale morning sky. Children were captivated, but adults felt unease. How could something so large appear so secretly? Curiosity drew them in, step by hesitant step. The gates beckoned, but the air was still. This place was different, expectant, as if waiting. Even as they ventured onto the grounds, an unsettling feeling persisted. This carnival was not like any other, holding a darker, more patient magic. Whispers started quietly about the children. The stories persisted, growing more alarming. A pattern emerged, centering on one attraction: the Carousel. Parents noticed bizarre changes in children who rode it. The transformations were noticeable. Fear gripped the community. This was something unnatural, something tied to the Carousel. A fainter, ethereal melody was heard by some. It was as if the ride was choosing its victims, a sign that something paranormal was at play. The sun climbed over Oakhaven's sleepy horizon. It painted the sky in familiar hues, but the light revealed something utterly new, something impossible. Down on Miller's Field, where only grass grew yesterday, now stood a carnival. Towering structures, brightly colored canvas. It had appeared from nowhere. No sound had announced its arrival. No rumbling trucks, no shouts of workmen. It was simply there. A silent, shocking spectacle under the morning sun. A sudden, inexplicable intrusion into their predictable world. Residents awoke to this bizarre reality. They blinked away sleep, then blinked again. Disbelief warred with the evidence before their eyes. From kitchen windows, from front porches, they saw it. The impossible fairground, it shimmered in the early light, a mirage, or a dream made solid. Questions formed, unspoken at first, then whispered. How could this be? Why had it chosen their quiet town? Who were these creators of sudden spectacle, these masters of silent arrival? The town held its breath. The news spread like wildfire. Phone lines buzzed, neighbors called to neighbors. Do you see it? The question echoed, over and over, a chilling chorus. Some felt a thrill, a spark of the unexpected. Others felt a prickle of unease, a sense of trespass. This was not normal. This was not right. The carnival stood silent, as if waiting. Its presence was a challenge, a mystery demanding to be explored. Yet, a warning seemed to hang in the air. Children were the first to voice excitement. Their eyes, wide with wonder, saw only magic. A playground descended from the heavens. They tugged at parental hands, their pleas to visit, immediate and insistent. For them, the carnival was a gift, a surprise adventure. But for the adults, the feeling was more complex, a strange magnetism, mixed with a deep, primal suspicion. This sudden joy, it felt unearned, it felt dangerous. The field, once familiar, was now alien territory. The colors were the first thing that truly struck you. So vivid, so aggressively cheerful. Bold reds screamed from painted signs, bright yellows blazed on tent tops, deep blues swirled on ride carriages. These hues were a stark contrast against the muted greens of the field and the soft blue of the morning sky. They were, honestly, an assault on the senses, a deliberate, almost desperate attempt at gaiety, as if trying just a bit too hard to convince you of innocent fun, of harmless delight. Yet look closer. Shadows clung to every structure. They pooled beneath the looming Ferris wheel. They lurked in the dark mouths of game stalls. They deepened the folds of the heavy tent canvas. The sun, now climbing higher, fought to dispel them, but the shadows held their ground, stubbornly. They were an intrinsic part of this carnival. As much as the bright paint, as much as the promise of laughter. These patches of darkness felt cold, ancient, as if they held the carnival's true secrets. The allure was undeniable, despite the strangeness, despite the gnawing unease. People were drawn towards it like moths to a flickering forbidden flame. The children, of course, led the charge. Their innate curiosity unburdened by adult cynicism. They saw only wonder, adventure, a chance to escape the ordinary. Parents followed more hesitantly, torn between protecting their young and their own buried desire for a taste of the extraordinary, for a thrill. Every ride seemed to beckon. The silent carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-prance, the towering swing ride, its empty chairs swaying gently in a non-existent breeze. Each structure was a promise of laughter, of excitement, of memories waiting to be made. But beneath that surface, another, quieter promise resonated. A darker invitation into the heart of something unknown, something that had arrived unbidden and watched them with unseen eyes. The town was being seduced. The first few brave souls ventured forward. Their footsteps were hesitant on the damp grass. They moved towards the carnival's edge where, honestly, an invisible line separated the familiar from the alien. The air itself felt different there, charged, expectant. The usual morning sounds of Oakhaven faded, replaced by an unnerving quiet. A profound stillness emanated from the fairground. It was the silence of a held breath, or maybe a carefully laid trap waiting to be sprung. The main gates stood wide, an open invitation, or perhaps a dare. No one guarded them. No cheerful attendant waited to take tickets. No welcoming music spilled out. Just an eerie, empty threshold, leading into a world of garish colors and deep, unsettling shadows. To step through those gates was to accept the unknown, to willingly enter the mystery. Some paused at the entrance, a shiver tracing a path down their spine, a final moment of doubt. Then, a sound, so faint it was almost imagined. A single drawn-out note like a sigh or a distant mournful horn. It seemed to emanate from the very heart of the carnival, perhaps from the carousel. It hung in the air for a moment, then vanished, leaving behind an even deeper silence and a fresh wave of questions. Was that a test? A signal? The carnival remained still, but it no longer felt entirely dormant. Something within it had stirred. A peculiar sensation began to spread among those closest. A subtle vibration, felt more than heard. It pulsed up from the earth, through the soles of their shoes, as if a giant unseen machine was awakening deep beneath the ground. The carnival was not just wood and canvas, it felt alive, a sleeping beast. Its presence was a low thrum, a silent symphony only the truly attentive could perceive. It was waiting for the day to fully bloom, for its audience to gather. More townsfolk began to arrive, drawn by the impossible spectacle and the rapidly spreading word. They came in twos and threes, then in larger groups. They lined the perimeter of Miller's Field, a growing crowd of onlookers, their faces a mixture of expressions, awe, confusion, excitement, and a thread of undeniable fear. They were witnessing something beyond their comprehension, something that had chosen their ordinary town for its extraordinary appearance. The air crackled with unspoken questions. The initial apprehension, especially among the children, began to wane. It was replaced by a rising tide of excitement. This was not just a story, not a rumor. It was real. A full-sized carnival right here in Oakhaven. The vibrant colors, the promise of rides, the scent of something new and unknown. It was intoxicating. They chattered eagerly, pointing at the Ferris wheel, speculating about the games. Their youthful energy was infectious, starting to chip away at the adults' reserve. Yet the older residents watched with a different kind of gaze. Their eyes held a cautious wisdom. Some remembered tales from their own childhoods, stories of traveling shows that appeared and disappeared like mist, often leaving behind unsettling rumors or unexplained events. This carnival felt different, more potent, its sudden arrival too clean, too silent. Their instincts, honed by years of quiet living, screamed a silent warning that all was not as it seemed. The sun climbed towards its zenith, casting shorter shadows, but the carnival's mystery only deepened. It stood there, a vibrant, silent challenge, its purpose veiled, its operators unseen. The community of Oakhaven stood at a crossroads, drawn by an irresistible allure, yet haunted by a nameless dread. The first tentative steps towards the open gates would mark the beginning of an encounter that would change their town forever. The day was young. The carnival waited. The calliope music swelled, cheerful and hypnotic, drawing in the unsuspecting. Timmy Evans, clutching his ticket, chose a white stallion. He dismounted, changed, taller, voice deeper. His mother felt a chill. Later, Mr. Abernathy rode, hoping for nostalgia. He stepped off, older, frailer, confusion in his eyes. These were the first whispers, subtle shifts easily dismissed. But for those who noticed, the carousel was no longer innocent. It took moments of your life or cruelly added them. The gilded trap had begun to spring, slowly, silently. Its toll was unseen but real. Stories spread. Children regressed, adults aged overnight. Emily returned from the carousel with a child's mind. Mark, a boy, found stubble and aching joints. The pattern was undeniable. Only the carousel changed people. Some aged forward, some backward. No logic, just horror. The town doctor found no explanation. Time itself seemed stolen or gifted. Disbelief gave way to fear. The carnival's secret was a wound in Oakhaven's life, and it bled terror into every home. Beneath the carnival's music, a faint haunting melody called to some. Those who heard it felt compelled, drawn to the carousel despite dread. The tune was different for everyone, but always hypnotic, promising ecstasy or oblivion. It bypassed reason, a psychic hook planted deep. Stories spread of people unable to resist, families restraining loved ones. The carousel felt sentient, its horses' smiles now predatory sneers. It was the heart of the carnival's darkness, a beautiful monster singing its deadly lullaby. Oakhaven was beginning to understand the true price of its ride. Panic crept through Oakhaven. The carnival's joy turned to dread. Too many stories, too much proof, children old, elders young. Attempts to rationalize failed, the changes were real. The carnival became a place of fear, its music a dirge. Parents warned children away, laughter sounded hollow. The carousel stood at the nightmare's center, spinning years away. Most stayed distant, watching as night fell and shadows writhed. Relief was nowhere in sight, only deepening horror. Calls to the police began, hesitant, desperate, unbelievable. Sergeant Miller, skeptical at first, was soon overwhelmed by the volume and terror of reports. The police visited the carnival, tension thick beneath the festive facade. Workers were evasive, their eyes distant, their answers hollow. The carousel spun, children still riding, but fear hung in the air. Then, a woman pointed at an old man, her husband, changed in a single ride. The investigation had begun, and it was already chilling. Oakhaven's protectors faced something far beyond their training. Sergeant Miller's skepticism shattered under the weight of evidence. The town looked to the police for answers, but this was beyond logic or law. Their visit to the carnival was unsettling. Workers' smiles were masks, their denials empty. The carousel glowed eerily, its horses sneering, its music a warning. Miller saw a child dismount, a flicker of age in his eyes. Was it real, or a trick of the mind? The line between reality and nightmare blurred. The investigation was treading on cursed ground. Oakhaven's protectors were powerless against the impossible. News of Oakhaven's affliction spread, drawing journalists hungry for a bizarre story. Reporters, bloggers, and photographers descended, seeking truth or sensationalism. Interviews revealed genuine fear and chillingly consistent stories. The journalists' skepticism eroded as the impossible stared back. Carnival operators stonewalled, workers vanished into crowds. The carnival seemed immune to scrutiny, its secrets fiercely guarded. The reporters felt the weight of something that did not want to be understood. This was more than a story. It was a confrontation with the unknown. Sarah Jenkins, the young reporter, found herself deeply affected by the interviews. She sat in quiet living rooms, listening to parents weep for children changed beyond recognition. She heard the quavering voice of an elderly woman describing how her husband had stepped off the carousel with the bewildered eyes of a man half his age. His memories fractured, his identity dissolving. These weren't just sources, they were victims. Their pain was raw, their confusion absolute. Each testimony was a fresh stab of the bizarre, a new, chilling detail in an impossible puzzle. One interview stood out: a teenage boy named Alex. He had ridden the carousel on a dare. He emerged, he claimed, with memories that weren't his own, visions of a past life or perhaps a future one. He spoke of unfamiliar faces, of events that hadn't happened. He looked the same, but inside he was adrift, lost in a sea of borrowed time. Their son was there, yet he was gone, replaced by a stranger in a familiar shell. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as if he were recounting a dream or a nightmare. The challenge for the investigators, both police and journalists, was immense. How do you document something so subjective, so deeply personal? The victims described sensations, feelings, impossible shifts in perception that left no physical trace beyond the obvious, horrifying age changes. Their accounts were emotional, fragmented, colored by trauma and disbelief, yet the core elements remained consistent: the carousel, the strange music, the feeling of being altered. It was a chorus of voices singing a song of impossible horror, a song that chilled investigators to the bone. Witnesses who hadn't ridden the carousel also came forward. They described seeing loved ones step onto the ride and different people step off. They spoke of subtle changes in appearance, in demeanor, in the light behind their eyes. These observations, though second-hand, corroborated the victims' claims. They painted a picture of a phenomenon that was both terrifyingly real and maddeningly elusive. The investigators gathered these stories, each one a precious, horrifying piece of the puzzle. But the full picture remained shrouded in shadow and in fear. Each voice added a layer to the dread. The next logical step was to capture it, to get undeniable proof. Sergeant Miller and Chief Brody discussed surveillance, setting up cameras discreetly to film the carousel in operation, to document these alleged transformations. If they could get it on tape, then the world would have to believe. Then they would have something concrete, something to fight. They requisitioned the town's best camera equipment, limited as it was. They planned their operation with a kind of grim determination. They needed to see it for themselves, recorded, undeniable. Journalists too were eager for visual evidence. Sarah Jenkins tried to get permission to film, but the Carnival operators flatly refused. She resorted to covert methods, a small camera hidden in her bag. Another photographer tried long-lens shots from outside the perimeter, but the carousel seemed to resist. Batteries drained inexplicably fast, memory cards corrupted, recordings, when successful, showed nothing, or rather, nothing definitive. The changes, if they occurred, were too subtle for the camera's eye, or perhaps the phenomenon itself was camera-shy, actively avoiding capture. There were whispers among the investigators that the carousel knew, that it was aware of their attempts. One officer swore his camera malfunctioned only when pointed directly at the ride, its lens fogging over, its focus refusing to lock. Another journalist reported strange audio interference, a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound whenever he tried to record near the carousel. Coincidence? Or something more? The feeling grew that they weren't just observing a phenomenon. They were interacting with an intelligence, a malevolent, elusive force that toyed with their efforts. The frustration mounted. They had dozens of eyewitness accounts, heartbreaking testimonies, but the hard evidence remained out of reach, like trying to grasp smoke. The carousel continued its cheerful spin. Its music echoed through the town, a mocking soundtrack to their fruitless efforts. Was it only affecting certain people? Were there specific conditions? The lack of a clear pattern was maddening. The investigators felt like they were chasing shadows. Glimpses of the impossible that vanished the moment they tried to pin them down. The truth remained tantalizingly close, yet infinitely far. Days turned into a week. The investigation felt like wading through molasses. Every lead dissolved. The Carnival workers were like phantoms. Their backgrounds yielded nothing. No records, no past addresses. They offered no help, only blank stares and unsettling smiles. The psychological toll was immense. Their dreams were haunted. Their waking hours were consumed by a puzzle with no solution. How could they protect Oakhaven when they didn't understand the enemy? Journalists faced their own walls. The story defied conventional reporting. A sense of being watched permeated the investigation, not just by the workers, but by the Carnival itself. The walls of this mystery were not made of brick and mortar, but of something far more insidious. The fear in Oakhaven had festered. It had stolen their sleep and twisted their reality. Whispers turned to shouts. Enough was enough. The town decided it would not suffer in silence. They would not let this cursed carnival dictate their lives. A spark of defiance ignited. They would seek answers. Extraordinary circumstances had forged an unlikely alliance. They were bound by a common enemy. The time for quiet observation was over. They would march to the carnival together, demand the carousel be shut down. Tonight, Oakhaven would face its fear. Dusk painted the Oakhaven sky in bruised purples and angry reds. The townsfolk gathered in determined clusters, emerging from their homes with grim faces. Flashlights cut through the darkness as they marched into their collective nightmare. The air was unnaturally still, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting. As they neared Miller's Field, the carnival's lights burned brighter, its cheerful music a mocking taunt. The carnival grounds were eerily quiet, the few patrons vanished. The Ferris wheel stood as a silent sentinel. They pressed on, driven by a desperate need for answers. Chief Brody and Sergeant Miller led the crowd, armed with revolvers and dwindling explanations, into the unknown. Only the oppressive, watchful silence remained, and the hypnotic, spinning heart of it all, the carousel, waiting. They reached the carousel. It stood magnificent and terrifying, its lights pulsed with unholy energy. The music warped, taking on a discordant, menacing edge. The crowd faltered, replaced by a collective gasp of pure primal fear. The air grew unnaturally cold. This was the heart of the darkness, and it knew they were there. Suddenly, the calliope music died. An absolute deafening silence fell. Then a new sound emerged, resonating through the crowd. People clutched their heads, drawn towards the spinning horses. It was a psychic assault, overwhelming and terrifying. The carousel was fighting back. Chaos erupted as people began to transform. A sound like 1,000 tortured screams ripped through the night. The transformations began, horrifyingly visible. The darkest recorded incident was unfolding, orchestrated by the cursed machine. The horrific spectacle felt like an eternity spent in the deepest circle of hell. The carousel slowed, its demonic lights dimmed, leaving behind a ringing silence. A silence more terrifying than any sound. The remaining townsfolk stood frozen, paralyzed by shock. The scene was one of utter devastation, not of property, but of lives and sanity. Only the carousel seemed to pulse with a faint, triumphant energy. The community of Oakhaven was now broken, their spirits crushed. The echoes of the carousel's scream would haunt this town forever. The night bled into a gray dawn. Oakhaven was shrouded in silence. The townsfolk wandered in a stupor, faces etched with horror. The air felt heavy, tainted by echoes of impossible transformations. The carnival's energy had receded, leaving a gaping wound. As the sun rose, the carnival was gone. Vanished, utterly. The missing were still missing. Their absences were the only proof the horror had been real. How do you investigate a crime scene that has ceased to exist? Only the chilling truth of the carousel remained. Sarah Jenkins struggled to articulate the impossibility of what she'd witnessed. The editor's skepticism morphed into dawning horror. As terrified accounts leaked, a chilling consistency emerged. Oakhaven was never the same. The carnival had vanished, but its shadow lingered. The laughter of children became subdued, tinged with anxiety. Adults held a permanent watchfulness. Those who had lost loved ones carried an open wound. The community found itself fractured by shared trauma. And then there was the tune. The faint, ethereal melody that had heralded such profound horror. Survivors claimed to hear it still. Was it merely a phantom of memory, or something more? The official police files gathered dust, labeled unexplained. The story of Oakhaven serves as a chilling warning. That there are tunes best left unheard. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.